So really, I'm always out in the field. There's a lot of pictures of me outside. And here's me with a couple students from an ecology class. We're explaining how to collect different samples. But today is more, it's more about my personal journey and the lessons that I have learned that are really important that I want to share with you. So the journey is not straightforward. There are lots of bends and curves. And I happen to embrace those bends and curves. It's important. You'll never know what you find. You'll find some new experience. But if you're like, I'm only going to do the straight line, I'm going to do what's easily ready and ahead of me, you really have to embrace the curves. It's not going to be a straight line. So go along with the curves. And that's pretty much what I'm going to talk about is those curves. So my journey starts being born and raised in Delaware. I went to a very, very small deaf school. So you can see, now it's called Delaware School for the Deaf, but it used to be called Margaret S. Stirk School for the Deaf. And it was all sign exact English, simultaneous communication, and there was very few deaf teachers. There wasn't a lot of role models in that school for me. And the school didn't advertise, oh, we're going to have the Deaf Olympics there. It was very limited exposure. So I was one of the people I was the only person that went to the Deaf Olympics, and the school was very excited to have someone involved with the Deaf Olympics. It's the same as the Olympics, right? They have the same events, wrestling, swimming, that kind of thing. This was when I was still in high school. You can see my hair there. I have the bangs. I kind of have a similar style, I guess. Now, I mentioned Delaware because I think about swimming and how it's related to my career and oceanography. So this is something I thought it'd be really cool to see if my record still stands there from the summer league. A lot of people come in every year for the summer competition, but my name is Miller. It's from the 1980s, and the record is still there. It's kind of impressive. But two of us on the swim team, we went off to join college swim teams in college as well. So by that time, swimming and water were very important to me. So my dad is a professor, and I always looked up to him. He had a really flexible schedule. He could always get into specific fields that he wanted to get into. He can go to different places. I thought it'd be really cool. I thought the professor life was awesome. So of course, I told Dad I wanted to visit a professor at the Naval Academy. And we actually moved from Delaware to Annapolis. And that's where we actually rented a house there on a creek. So I could go right into the backyard, and there's a creek right there. And we bought a small sunfish sailboat. It wasn't too big, but we could still go out and enjoy ourselves. We could jump out, go swimming, and then the Coast Guard would come out and say that you have to get back in the boat, you can't be swimming here. And one winter, we went out to the cove, and the boat sank. It froze in the ice, and eventually it sank. But I could go out into the backyard and go to the creek and go swimming or boating, but sometimes I couldn't because there was pollution in the water. So just to be clear, I can't swim because of the pollution. Okay, and I want to do something about that now. So of course, a young person wants to change the world. I want to go out and make a difference. So this is the area here. One of the lower red star is, that's where I was. I want to go out on the boat, I want to go sailing, I want to go swimming, and people in the area really want to restore their waterlands. So in high school, I wanted an internship related to that, of course, cleaning. So the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service had an opportunity available. It was for a summer internship. And of course, you get to go out a lot. But at the same time, you get to see how the government works on environmental issues. There's a lot of bureaucracy, there's a lot of reporting, there's a lot of red tape. And by that time that I got to college, I wasn't really sure. I mean, I wanted to do something related to this, but how and what are the steps? I wasn't really sure. So by the time I got to college, at that time, Al Gore was very famous as an alum. He was in Congress for many years at that point. Anyway, I was really tired of scientists refusing to talk about policy and policy people, and they were not connecting, and policy people were not connecting with the sciences. So you guys can see the problem. There's no environmental laws being passed because these two groups are not talking to each other. There's no communication. So when I went back to Harvard, I said, please graduate people who can cross those lines and communicate. So I talked to several faculty there, and an environmental science and public policy major was started, and I was one of the first people to graduate from that. That was a 4-year program. So those were my very formative years because environmental science, the exposure, really helped me focus my discipline. Geology, atmospheric science, oceanography, chemistry, biology, physics, all those different fields, different departments, different classes. Economics was involved as well. Policy, I went to Kennedy School to take a class on policy there with the graduate students, and I'll never forget that experience. The years that I was in that environmental policy course, I was an undergrad, and I'm in the front with an interpreter, and oh, there's a deaf lawyer way in the back with a captionist. So of course people are, okay, we have this kind of deaf person, we have this kind of deaf person. There's like a contrast. But it was a really great experience. So at that time I started to realize there needs to be changes to the system. And it started to form my understanding of how the system works and become a system thinker. And I think that really helped me become more flexible and willing to go with the curves, like I mentioned before. So this is one of my favorite professors at Harvard. He was actually in the architecture school, the School of Design, and landscaping. He was a landscaping ecologist. So we understand how landscaping worked and how that factors into the environment. You can't just ignore people, of course, because people are part of the landscape. So I remember the first day of class, he said, okay, you guys haven't had the experience of older graduate students that they've had, so how can we prevent the world from turning into just a horrible, polluted place? So I kind of got a new energy from that, from his question. Spring break, that year I went to Florida. I didn't go to Cancun for spring break, no. I went to a biology research station in Florida. And I went to Archbold Biological Station. It's pretty much under sea level, but right in the middle, it's just right in the middle of the area. It's just above sea level. It's kind of a unique area. We have so many stories from that 1 week. I will never forget them. One night, we went out looking for owls. At night, okay. Me and the interpreter, I don't really know if there's a benefit for me to go on that night hike. I can't see you. I can't hear. I'm not gonna have all my senses. I'm gonna feel a little nervous. No, I want you to have the same experience as the other students, and I really appreciated that the interpreter said that, but I feel like I won't have any senses left. Finally, the interpreter said, fine, you don't have to go. And, the professor said that. You didn't really miss anything. The professor was just talking the whole time. There was another time we went to a swamp, a mangrove swamp. And you can see the trees kind of out of the ground and the roots go into it. So we're walking through the area and the professor, he picked up a snake and just held it. And he was explaining, talking about the snakes. And the interpreter said, I am not standing by the professor. I'm sorry, I'm not doing it. So she walked over to the side. So I had to go from side to side, from the interpreter to the professor. So for interpreters, you got to be ready for situations.
So the third story, we went in a lake about up to our waist. You could still walk. And the interpreter told me that they were not getting in the water, that they were going to stay on the dock and interpret from there. Now, my interpreter was about the same height as I was. But what if the professor went into the middle of the lake? I can't see that far. I was trying to explain to the interpreter that this might be an issue, but they told me it would be fine. So, okay, fine. I followed the professor and the other students, and we actually went into the middle of the lake, and he was presenting, and you can see this woman on the dock, the interpreter, stomp her foot and go into the lake, out to the middle of the lake to interpret. So just to let you know, interpreters, you have to have interpreters willing to go into the areas of work that you do, and the interpreters have to be willing, because you never know. Maybe let them know in advance if you can, if that's possible, but you can't always do that. But honestly, after that class, I never looked at planes again, and how from a plane, I looked at the landscapes and the forests and waterways, etc. I realized that how we structure our society can impact changes on things. Another important person in my college career, a Nobel Prize winner, Tyler Price. You have Nobel Prize in chemistry or Nobel Prize in biomedicine, etc., but there is not one for environmental science. University of Southern California established a prize for those who had become well known in environmental science. He won, was a co-winner with another professor last year. This is Jim McCarthy. He has done a lot of work with the ocean and a variety of things. But I remember hearing that he applied for a variety of REU programs and was rejected from them. I really wanted an experience last summer to do an opportunity at the University of Maryland, environmental science. So I told him that. He picked up the phone. Hello, Pat. I have a student here from Maryland. Would you be happy to take the student for me? And so Pat actually became a faculty advisor for me later, but Pat was willing to have me come on board. So I went to the University of Maryland that summer with no money, no pay. I was completely voluntary. And of course, the university provided room and board, but no pay for the program. I'm not sure about other students, but it was most important that I was a part of the program. But it was really great because last year when he won the prize, he invited me to the dinner with him. He still thought about me 20 years later. And I will explain a little bit more about this experience, but I have never forgotten him. So this is Pat up here, upper left, and this was my summer experience at Maryland. I was involved with a variety of experiments that summer, and I realized at that point that science was what I wanted to do. Policy, I could take or leave. It wasn't really my thing. It was important that I understood policy and knew how to communicate across the disciplines, but my passion was science. And I did my senior thesis with Pat and published my senior thesis from this project. Of course, Pat wanted me to come there for graduate school. Oftentimes, internship experiences will lead to graduate opportunities. But I had lived on the East Coast my whole life, Delaware, Maryland, Massachusetts. I wasn't sure I wanted to go west. But I'll explain a little bit more in a bit. I did indeed go west. Another important thing from that summer in Maryland, there was an Australian working in our lab as well, an Australian scientist. I thought that I wanted a break between my undergraduate and master's career, so I applied for a Fulbright fellowship. So I emailed this woman in Australia that I had met during my summer research experience. She already knew me. I asked if I could come. She said, sure. So I was able to come and work with her for that year, and it was the best year of my life. I got to Australia, had the opportunity to work with her. And then I developed a relationship with the University of Queensland at that time. I was involved in the deaf community while I was there, and really the Deaf Olympics. From that experience, I had met some deaf Australians, and so I already had a community ready, well, a strong swimming community ready for me when I got there. Now from Florida, now in Brisbane. Brisbane is similar to Florida and warm year-round. But now that University of Queensland had research experiences and opportunities on a variety of islands. So one time I got to go on one island owned by one university, and then one owned by University of Sydney, and the islands are owned by different universities. So often we were in the middle of nowhere just experiencing a variety of the Great Barrier Reef. And it's amazing how different the various parts are, and really, gosh, that was 20 years ago. I have no idea what it would look like today. The woman in the top right is who I worked with the most. It's the equivalent, the Australian equivalent of the EPA. And then the University of Queensland, interestingly, is you don't have to go there to work with Americans. You can go elsewhere to work with Americans, not just in America, but of course a variety of the lab people and lab techs were Australian. But anyways, I had, again, network building is very important no matter where you go. And this is just an idea of some of the various islands. This was called the Low Isle, and we could go around it in about 5 minutes. Can you imagine just watching people over and over, just looking at each other all day, every day? And then the top left picture, you can see one tree on the island. That was the most fascinating experience because, well, for example, if I wanted to take a shower, I had to wait until the water would fill up the tank and then wait all day for the sun to warm the water, and then I could shower in the evening. And we had a compost toilet, not an actual running plumbing bathroom, so you would have to cover what you would do. And we also had not really a hardwood floor or anything, we had shells and dirt. That's also where I learned that people in my field work hard and play hard. I remember 2 faculty that would just drink and talk into the night all night. So now, learning the culture of the field is also very important for you. It was also nice because that year I was able to meet a variety of people from different graduate programs and could ask them all the questions I had to figure out where the best place would be for me. had what I called the graduate school dilemma. I had to decide where to go to graduate school. Really, it's an issue was the West Coast versus the East Coast. And I said that because oceanography programs are often on the East Coast, but at the far north or the far south. The Western coast are at the mid-campus. If you look at the University of Washington and University of California, etc., they are all on the main campus. Whereas most East Coast universities, they're not on the main campus, they're in different sites. And so you have to think about how to get interpreting services at those sites. Because of that issue and possible problem, of course, West won. I would be on the main campus of the university, and the interpreters would be there. However, a few years later, the balance went in the opposite direction. The blue is a pro for that university, and a red is a con for that university, okay? University of Washington's pros were they easily provided interpreters for social events. Graduate students are very social animals. I mean, it's a very important part of the program. So the University of Washington provided interpreters for those social events without an issue. And that's why I said kegger, because every Friday, interpreters were provided where a keg was brought. And so all the students got together, had our conversations while we drank from the keg, right? They provided interpreters for that, no problem. Another thing I also learned, you learn where the disability office is located. At the University of Washington, the interpreters were centralized. They were centralized, not under specific departments throughout the university. Now, a unit within the Division of Student Life was very important. As long as it was under that, there were no issues. But one of the cons was the advisors. I did not visit the University of Washington in advance. I didn't meet with the professors, with my advisor, with my potential mentor. I also did not talk with students. They are a wonderful source of information. They will tell you which advisor is great and which is not so much, and that you want to avoid at all costs. So if you're looking at a graduate program, visit it. I cannot emphasize it enough. Visit that location, and you can feel immediately if you click for, or will click for the next 5 or 6 or however many years. So you need to test that out with the advisor. I also ended up with a micromanaging advisor who apparently did not actually have their own research lab. When I left that lab, other students left also. So that says a lot about the lab, actually. At the end, I decided to the department ombudsman and I decided to do that to explain the reasons that I was leaving. I wanted the program to have some feedback. And the ombudsman said, if you'd have told me earlier, I could have changed your PI, your faculty mentor, what have you, but it was too late at that point. I was already ready to leave. Now, the University of Maryland, on the other hand, their disabilities office is under their learning disabilities office. To secure interpreters for things that are not credit-bearing, then the department is charged. So if I want to go to a weekly seminar, but it's not for a credit, that means that I have to pay versus my department paying, and that becomes a very awkward and sticky situation. There were also many faculty that didn't understand that, well, I'll call them remote labs, you know. They may be an hour and a half from DC, so is the interpreter willing to drive an hour and a half for, you know, a 1-hour meeting or a few hour meetings? I mean, and that's, I would love the interpreter willing to do that, but one day I remember there was a seminar, And normally I sit on one side, but the podium was in the way. So I moved to the other side of the room so I could see the PowerPoint screen as well as the interpreter, etc. And one faculty member asked if I could please move to the back, that I was blocking their view. I broke down literally. I said, I tried so hard to get an interpreter here, and then you're telling me to move, and that's one of my problems. I was so upset. I broke down at that moment. And that was a moment where they didn't realize. And then, of course, everyone he was so nice to me from there. They see me on the plane or in the hallway. They're like, oh, hello, hi, how are you doing? Of course. But the pro was my advisor. Oh my goodness, what an amazing advisor I had. They were a huge advocate for me when I had issues with interpreters. They would call the main campus and let them know there was an issue and say, oh, I'm friends with the chancellor, so I will make this happen. So really, your advisor, well, even if there's a problem with an interpreter, your advisor could be a great resource for you. I am glad that I went to the University of Washington first and then the University of Maryland second, and I would do it again. Because, of course, I met a different group of people at both places, and I learned different things from different places. And when I go to conferences, I have connections from both universities. And I would do it the same way over again because of the experience gained.
So I did my master's thesis. I did get into the PhD program at Washington, and I was expected to be finished with my PhD when I left, but I had some issues with my master's going on. So I'm a type A person. I need to get straight A's. I need to get everything done. If I don't do it, then there's no point. So I decided to kind of start over a little bit, and that's another curve. It's, again, not a straight line through my education and experience. Really interesting. I got to work with someone who worked with algae. And we studied algae and carbohydrates, the chlorophyll inside the algae itself. It was very interesting work. So remember, so I've already had 6 years of education. We're doing another 3, so a total of 9 years. I'm working on my master's, and they didn't transfer the credits, but they waived the courses that I already had taken. So I don't have to take the class again, but I still need to take 20 credits of courses. And with that, I'm working full-time. Gallaudet hired me to work PhD program, and so I'm trying to balance these two things, working and getting my PhD. And at that time, I had a boyfriend, said, you know, I'd leave on Thursday night, drive to University of Maryland, spend the weekend there. There's no one in the lab except me, so I'm working very, very hard. Drive back on Monday, teach Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday again, and then I'm back to the lab, and I'm just driving back and forth. So I'd see people at Maryland on Friday and Monday, and that's it. And then in the summertime, I would stay at the lab. So the relationship with a boyfriend was very difficult. So it was a different experience than most people. And at that time, I noticed or I realized that I really needed the community. I really needed the socialization. And at the same time, I needed my people, environmental people. And this gave me both because I could go back and forth. So they weren't separate. They couldn't coexist. It was just difficult. And this is where I continued the legacy of Dr. McCarthy. This was back in the early 70s, studying urea. It's an organic compound. Most of that work is with oceanography and organics. When we go to the bathroom, we expel urea. And so he wanted to see what the impact on the ecosystem is. So we wanted to study the utilization of urea in the ecosystem, uptake, how it's processed. These are the different compounds in the different areas that it impacts. So Jim McCarthy was getting ready to retire, and he had a special issue, and I got to help write a chapter in that special issue that was published. So, we have family, our family lineage. We also have academic lineage. So we have here Dick Epley. He came up with the paradigm that's used over and over and over in oceanography, the new and the recycled nitrogen in the ocean. The new nitrogen is what's coming from the land, and it's seeping into the ocean. And the recycled is what the creatures from their waste is already in the ocean. And Dick was actually Jim's PhD advisor. And now we're moving down the line to Pat, and Jim was Pat's PhD advisor. And now from Pat, we're moving down, and we have a couple graduate students over the past couple years. The woman with the red star, her name's Debbie Bronk. Well, every time that we emailed each other, hello, academic big sister. Oh, hello, academic little sister. That was our greeting to each other in our emails. So we would kind of joke around, because we had the same advisor, we had very similar work. Anyway, she became the president of our professional association of science and luminology and oceanography. And now she's working in Maine in a lab there at Bigelow. And just to give you an idea of how big of a name she is, she was asked to testify in front of Congress. And she pretty much told Congress, climate change is happening. That's the end of it. I really love this last sentence here. It's too late to rely on mitigation. The carbon ship has left the dock, and humanity has shown little commitment to bringing it back to port. We really have to adapt at this point. So you can see the family lineage. Of course, we see each other at a conference, we give each other a big hug, how you doing? We catch up a little bit. Recently, we were just at a conference in Puerto Rico. We go to really cool places. We went to Hawaii, we went to Puerto Rico, we went to really great conference places. We have a really good connection, the two of us. Anyway, done with my PhD. I'm faculty at Gallaudet. Most people will do a postdoc. Okay, so I've finished in Australia. I've finished at University of Washington. I've finished at University of Maryland. I feel like I'm done. I've been around. I have a network. I have people that I know in all these different places. I can start my own research program. I think it's time. So I started looking for something that was mine. I wanted something to be mine. And Gallaudet is right near the Potomac River. It's really big. There's a lot of research on the Potomac. There's a lot of research on the bay. But Anacostia, oh, that's kind of cute. It's a nice little watershed. It's right near Gallaudet. And I did a little bit of research, and there's not a lot known about the Anacostia River. There's maybe 2 or 3 papers that have been done, and that's it. So I was like, ooh, an opportunity. Oh, goody. So I started looking for funding. One thing about big NSF grants, I'm thinking about a local river. DC and 2 counties in Maryland are the only people that share that watershed. I had to look at some small state funding as well, and I found maybe $10,000 for 1 year. Oh, that's not bad. I can manage with $10,000. I'm going to need more money later, yes, of course, but $10,000 is a pretty good start. So I grabbed some undergrad students to see how they could help me. So we went ahead with the Anacostia program. Again, at that time, I had no idea that the city was suing the EPA because of the pollution of the river. And they were starting to build infrastructure down underneath the water level. So I realized I'm going to get data and statistics before the tunnel's built, and I can get data and statistics afterwards. So it's a great opportunity. It's actually a really beautiful area. People just don't realize because it's in Washington, D.C. There's bald eagles are coming back to the area. You can see beavers on the river. It's improving slowly. And it's been a wonderful opportunity for students. The students love going out onto the boat. There's a line of students that really just want to go. Everyone's trying to fight for a spot on the boat. But what really made it possible is a relationship with the river keeper. All the U.S. rivers in the U.S. have river keepers. And one thing, I didn't want to own a boat. I didn't want to maintain a boat. I'd rather pay someone to do that. But at the same time, I knew I needed someone who had network in the community, who could talk to citizens, who could do outreach. Because as a scientist, we need to do outreach as well. And so I can do that through the river keeper, who has networks with different organizations and citizens in the area. So I happened to contact two not-for-profit organizations, one watershed organization and the Anacostia River Keeper. The watershed organization said, we do fundraising, but we don't really have the room. Riverkeeper said, yes, I can absolutely help you. Here you go. So now we're on our 6th year working together with the Riverkeeper. And over the years, every summer the students want to go out, and of course the program changes a little bit. There's new ideas that the students have. For example, well, we didn't have this before, but now 6 years later, I know which spots are more important to research, and that's where we'll go, and we'll spend more money on certain places than others. It's a really exciting time for us right now because we have this tunnel being built. We have sewage treatment right on the Potomac. But the piping to get there, the problem, DC has a very, very old sewage system. So sewage and stormwater, they go into one pipe and they mix. And then when it rains too much, the system can't contain all the water and it goes right into the river and E. coli level skyrockets. It's illegal to do that into the river, and that's why the DC is suing. Now, there's a sewage treatment plant. So really for about 2 years, they've been drilling for about 2 years under the river. It's a machine called NANI. It's very important with DC politics. Now they have a Twitter. NANI has their own Twitter as a tunnel drilling machine. Elon Musk, he wants to actually buy the drilling machine, and he wants to drill from DC to New York. We can have a connection from DC to New York for a train or car or whatever. But of course, last year, it was open in March 2018, 1 year ago. So of course, I'm ready. I'm ready to see fast change in the water quality. And it just kept raining and raining and raining and raining and raining and raining. It just kept coming down. And the data didn't show any difference because it's not coming from the system, it's coming from the land now, just because it's been raining so much. So I'm really hoping this year is a little bit drier and I can see some results before my grant expires. And then I can just apply for a new grant. So these are some of the basics from the past 5 years. Ammonia, nitrates, urea. I want to see what impacts the algae in the area. I got a call from the DC Environmental Office. They've decided to give me the responsibility of keeping track of the algae in the area.
I just submitted a paper with all of my data, and you can see, of course, there's a lot more data that I am showing you. This is just a snapshot. I don't want to overwhelm you with any of that, but this is over 4 years. You can see some years are the same, some years fluctuate. Different sites might have different concentrations. But now we know what is similar before the tunnel and then what's different now after the tunnel, and we can tell that something is happening in which areas. We also looked at different algae in the river, and we did not document what types are there, but we finally have some data related to that. And not only that, but DC itself is tracking this just over in the started in the past 2 years or so, which is new for them. The first group is called the diatoms, and they're kind of like glass houses almost, so to speak. They're the sand on your beaches. Crumbled up diatoms are the sand on your beaches. People don't realize that you're actually walking on a lot of dead algae, but that's what you are on beaches. And then, and that is the most common group found. And then cyanobacteria. I don't know if you have seen many issues with, yes, Lake Ontario. I'm not sure if you have seen issues with harmful cyanobacteria, but it's possible. And then another group not as well known and has different nutrient needs that can be found in a variety of watersheds. If the nutrients change, that means the community is changing. So you can see either improvements or declines depending. I hope by now you see how important network is. Each location helps you build a network, and you need to keep that network as you go. It could be people that serve on your master's committee or thesis committee. Take advantage of that relationship and keep in contact with them over the years. Even professors that have taught your classes, you never know when you might have an idea that they might be able to help with, or they might be able to suggest someone else to work with. And more often, people go to conferences. And actually, my best network has been my graduate classmates. I think recently, actually, the Anacostia work has started doing some genetics work. When that kind of emerged, I contacted one of my graduate classmates. We know each other well, so we Skype, we email back and forth, whatever we need to do. So take advantage of those connections. And don't isolate yourself in your PhD classes. Converse with your fellow students. And you have to make yourself visible in the community. You must. If you don't go to conferences, how will you network? And how will you build that? And sometimes it's difficult watching one or two interpreters all day to go to all the events, but it's very important. I remember my first few conferences, I felt, oh, it's cool that you've got a sign for that. You know, the first 1 or 2 years, everyone would talk about the signs for that and how I came up with signs for this. But then after the second or third year, then people were finally ready to start talking to me about my science. I'm like, hello, I'm a scientist, not just a cool signer. You have to navigate things for a few years before people get used to you sometimes. Also, grab opportunities It might not necessarily look like it's related to your career trajectory, but it might end up being related. Someone contacted me from the University of Maryland, and they have a new science learning center called the Socio-Environmental Synthesis Center. They wanted me to assist in developing a course or module related to environmental synthesis. So I asked a fellow colleague at Gallaudet in economics. But of course, you know, some R1 universities are involved, some HBU, historically black serving universities, and other small universities were involved. But what the best thing for me was connecting with the HBU because of the similarities. And now that person that I met, I see all the time at the Maryland Water Quality Association meetings. And so we talk each other. Even though it's not oceanography related, it's still related to environmental science or the population at large, etc. Also, working there, I became good friends with the director of the center. I actually just saw a short course, and there 3 of us applied for this opportunity, and the person that applied first got it. The second and third applicants did not. But I was comfortable enough because I had already worked with the other 2 people, so I emailed the director and said, if you're going to study the community of an underrepresented group, you need those underrepresented researchers to be involved. You need to have a deaf person involved if you're doing deaf people work or whatever. And so they changed their mind, realized that they needed to have people involved. So I became a senior faculty for a person that was starting a program. It's important to encourage other people or put other people's names out for opportunities. And of course, maybe I said I wouldn't mind, but then actually all 3 of us got involved because of me speaking up for the importance of us being involved with this work. You never know what your platform will become for diversity in science. Take whatever opportunity you can to encourage that. I know it might be scary to see a picture of yourself that big, like in Washington, D.C. You can see the Washington Memorial behind me, but this shows that we as deaf people can do, and we can leverage our platform for good. I love this because it talks about the road, one less travel, that's the path, you know, you never know where it leads. That's all, I'm finished. Great.